Shalom Mashpaka. So before I get started, I just want to say that I forgot to say the difference on the last video between the Shabbat and the Shabbath. Okay, so first and foremost, the word for rod is Shabbat, Shan Bayath Tat. So Shabbat is how you would say that. And I already mentioned what it meant in the other video. However, the word for the seventh day of the week that we are to keep set apart is Shabbath. So it's Shan Bayath Tha. Okay. And I just wanted to make sure I pointed that out because they have two different functions. They are actually two different words because we actually mispronounce the seventh day. Most people say Shabbat, but it's actually Shabbath. Okay. All right. Moving along. Earlier today, when I was just meditating on Yahuwah's word and sitting with my father, talking about Yahuwah's word and sitting with my son and so on and so forth, Yahuwah brought to me a perfect example of what it looks like to spare the rod, right? So, and Yahusha talked about it. So in Yehukanan, John chapter 10, Yahusha talks about the hirelings. And it's a perfect chapter to use as an example of the last video talking about raising, training up a child and the way they are to go, so on and so forth, not to spare the rod, because Yahusha actually identifies himself in this particular chapter as the good shepherd, right? So I'm going to read from verse 1 all the way to verse 12, if I'm not mistaken. So, Aman, aman, I say unto you, he that enters not by the door into the sheepfold, but climbs up some other way, the same is a thief and a robber. But he that enters in by the door is the shepherd of the sheep. To him the porter opens, and the sheep hear his voice, and he calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. And when he puts forth his own sheep, he goes before them, and the sheep follow him, for they know his voice. And a stranger they will not follow, but will flee from him, for they know not the voice of strangers. This parable spoke Yahusha unto them, but they understood not what things they were which he spoke unto them. Then said Yahusha unto them again, Aman, aman, I say unto you, I am the door of the sheep. All that ever came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not hear them. I am the door. By me, if any man enters in, he shall be saved, and shall go in and out and find pasture. The thief comes not but for to steal, and to kill, and to destroy. I am come that they might have life, and that they might have it more abundantly. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd gives his life for the sheep. But he that is a hireling and not the shepherd, whose own the sheep are not, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and flees, and the wolf catches them and scatters the sheep. The hireling flees because he is a hireling and cares not for the sheep. So if we go back to what Proverbs 13 and 24 says, that he who spares the rod hates his son, right? So, and then we pair it to what it says, because he is a hireling and cares not for the sheep, hates the sheep, basically, right? So Yahusha is reiterating the same thing from Proverbs 13 and 24, because the hireling sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep. The hireling does not protect the sheep. And remember, the rod is for the protection of the sheep against predators, and a wolf is a predator. So this is a perfect example of sparing the rod. And Yahusha teaches this. However, I want to continue on. So this is verse 14 going on down. I am the good shepherd and know my sheep and am known of mine. As the Father knows me, even so know I the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. So Yahusha is the contrast of these hirelings. He's protecting the sheep. He is the rod of protection, right? And other sheep I have which are not of this fold, them also I must bring, and they shall hear my voice, and there shall be one fold and one shepherd. That's the grafted in. Yahusha is saying that there are people that are going to be grafted in to the fold. Therefore does my Father love me, because I lay down my life that I might take it again. No man takes it from me, but I lay it down of myself. I have power to lay it down, and I have power to take it again. This commandment have I received of my Father. So this is very significant, because when I was looking up the whole rod situation, one of the things that I found says that one of the things the shepherd would do when they saw a predator with the rod is they would take the rod and they would throw it down in front of the sheep to let the sheep know that that is a bad direction to go in, right? And of course, also physically against predators. But that is one of the ways they use it. So I find it interesting that Yahusha says that he lays down his life just like a shepherd would lay down the rod, right? To protect the sheep from the predator. It alerts the sheep to the fact that there's a predator, and it protects the sheep from being attacked by the predator, right? Because after the shepherd does that, he takes the staff and that little hook that's on the staff, and he guides the sheep back to safe pasture. And again, just like I used in the last video, Psalm 23 is a perfect example of that. You know, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. As a matter of fact, let's go to Psalm 23. It says, Yahuwah is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the cycles of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of Yahuwah forever. So the thing that I love about this the most is verse 2. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. And then if you pair that with Yehukanan, John 10 and 9, I am the door. By me, if any man enters in, he shall be saved and shall go in and out and find pasture. So I just thought it was so interesting that these two kind of paired very well together. And then, of course, it's talking about a rod and a staff. And Yahusha's talking about how he lays his life down, just like the shepherd would lay down the rod of protection for the sheep. So when Yahuwah was talking to me about the hireling being a great example of sparing the rod, I was like, wow. Yeah, because if the hireling is leaving, that means there's not only no protection, there's no guidance. You know what I'm saying? So the sheep have no shepherd. And, whew. All right, y'all. Love you much. Shalom.